Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Onix News Radio podcast, your news source for all things unexplained. And now, here's your host for the Onix News podcast, Margie Kay.
Good evening and welcome to Onix News. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and we are here every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So thank you for joining me tonight. I just want to run over a couple of things very quickly that are new at the Onix Network. If you go to onixnetwork.com, we now have a swag shop, and that there's t-shirts, there's bags, there's drinkware, there's all kinds of stuff that is available and some of it is really cool. So you want to check that out. Also, Onix Magazine is out quarterly. This is our latest issue. We've got a lot of good articles in here. You want to check that out as well at onixnetwork.com. And we have a page that is dedicated to conferences, all types of paranormal conferences around the world. This is one of them that's coming up in August. It's the Midwest Conference on the Unknown. And this is the place in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where the crash happened in 1941. So, of course, they're going to be covering that subject as well as many others. And then coming up is the Arkansas Paranormal Expo in October. And you want to check that out and as well as all of the other conferences that are coming up that are listed there. If you have a conference that you are doing or that needs to be listed, just go ahead and send it to me through our contacts at onixnetwork.com and we'll get it listed. This evening, I have a very special guest. Lisa Martin is someone that I have known for many years, and I've wanted to have her on my show for quite some time. She is a lifelong resident of Missouri. Lisa is an author, historian, producer, and attorney with longstanding interests in history and the paranormal. Lisa is a producer and writer of the Dark Ozarks TV series, which is coming up, and videocast. And she is also the director of the Paranormal Science Lab. That is a research group which focuses on paranormal research at historic locations. Lisa is a frequent speaker on history, the paranormal, and unexplained mysteries. Welcome to the program, Lisa.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much. You are a very busy lady, I see, and you've got lots of irons in the fire.
Yes, so are you.
Well, like attracts like, I guess.
I think so.
Well, you were involved in a conference a few years ago, and that's where I met you. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of kept in touch ever since then. But let's start from the beginning. What got you interested in the paranormal?
I think a lot of people who end up in the field, it's from personal experiences. I grew up on a farm not far from Joplin, Missouri, that was the site of Civil War battles. And we had strange things that happened as I was growing up. So early on, I learned, things happen and I wasn't scared of them, but it was accepted. It was part of sort of the history and the personality of the land. Later on, grew up, went off to college, law school, etc., and focused on building a family and so forth. I'd always been interested in the subject, but not that actively. And then actually, while I was looking at a house to buy, about, 22, 23 years ago, I had an experience that made me say, okay, I really want to find out more why these things happen. And basically what happened was that we were looking at a house. It was a turn of the century arts and craft home. And the agent was taking us through. The first thing that happened is my ex-husband was coming down the stairs, and there's like 4 flights of switchback stairs from the second floor down to the living room. And the agent and I had come on down, and we're standing there talking, and ghosts or paranormal activity is the last thing on my mind. I'm thinking numbers, etc.
Right.
We're talking, and he starts coming down, and he would pause about every step or two and then start looking over his shoulder. And I'm wondering what in the world's going on. He finally gets to the bottom, and he goes, "Did you guys hear that?" And we're like, "No." And he shakes it off. And then down in the basement, there was a big open area that had the original old boiler there. And I was kind of standing in that room, just kind of looking it over, and had really thick foundation walls, etc. And the other two had walked over to a side room. And as I was standing there, extreme cold, almost dry ice cold, the distinct sensation of a thumb laid on one side of my neck, and then 1,
Ooh.
2, 3, 4, and then
Yikes.
go through the back of my neck. And I was like, that's a little up close and personal. Not sure I really want to do my laundry here.
Right.
And so I decided, I walked over to the room that they were standing in just in time to hear the agent go, "Now, I don't know what this room would have been used for." And I am clairsentient. I'm empath. I walked to the doorway, and I just saw blood running. And one wall was all old apothecary cabinets. Another wall had 7 large metal sinks, and the largest drain you've ever seen in the floor. And I just said, "I'll tell you what it was. It was the embalming room."
Yes.
And I turned to walk to the stairs, and I could still hear her stiletto heels on the concrete running after me. And she finally says, "Well, I should tell you that this was a mortuary back in the 20s. I was like, I kind of figured that one out.
So disclosure from the real estate agent, right?
Right. Yeah, she did. I think she was hoping she could, that we'd still buy it. And we ended up not getting, actually bought a house less than a block away, though. And the irony is, over time, no one stays in that house very long. Not surprising.
I'll bet
And
not.
even when, I'll, take walks in the evening in the neighborhood, and you find yourself, you can just feel yourself being watched as you pass. And ironically, then, 2 or 3 years ago, I was doing a public tour of a haunted site that we manage events at. And during a little break, I heard a couple talking, and they were talking about, "Hey, do you remember when so-and-so owned that house?" And from what they said, I very quickly realized that sounds like that house. So I asked them, and it was. Family members had owned it back in the 80s and had lots of activity, including poltergeist activity. So my experience was confirmed there.
Wow.
But that's the experience that made me say, okay, I want to know more about why these things happen.
I'll bet. Yeah. The hand on the throat would really get your attention. That as an attorney, I have an attorney question.
Okay.
Is it true that some states do require disclosure about paranormal activity and some don't?
Yes, actually, as far as I know, New York is the only state that it has to be disclosed. The only one that I know of, and there actually is a court case there where someone sued a buyer sued the seller for not disclosing apparently a pretty severe haunting. Saying that if they had realized what was going on, they would not have purchased the home. And the court finding was that is information that should be disclosed if the owner knows about it. Most, as far as I know, no other state requires disclosure on a haunting, but a lot of states do require disclosure if there was a murder and the owner knows about it.
Okay. So you would at least know if there's a murder in the house.
Right. You're supposed to know anyway. Yeah.
Right. Right. It'd be nice if all the states would disclose, but there's a lot of haunted houses that would probably never get sold.
Well, that's true, but I think that was true for a long time, but I think it's kind of changing that there are a lot of people who are interested in buying haunted properties now.
Yeah,
So
yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure in the end how many sales will be lost or not.
People like you and me
Well, yeah.
who like the paranormal. I must say every house I've ever lived in has been haunted, and every other house, all of my investment properties and my office is haunted. Has that been the case with you?
Not everyone. The house I grew up in fact, it's still in the family. Definitely haunted. Actually, this one that I own now is haunted. It's an 1880s Victorian, and it's got a couple of ladies here and a couple of men that I've seen both ladies, but I have not had encounters with the two men, but other people have, including people who were just guests.
Oh, okay. Who
Um,
weren't expecting it.
yeah. One of the funniest ones uh, was when one of my sons was, I don't know, probably junior high age, and he had a friend over to spend the night. It was the first time this kid had been over to spend the night. And he goes upstairs to go to the restroom, and he comes back down, and he goes, "Who's the guy upstairs?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, okay. Now, my sons had seen the man, but I still have never seen it. But yeah.
So do these apparitions appear as full body apparitions and as solid or more ghostly?
The man appear the one man does appear solid to the point people think he's real. And we have no idea who he is. We can't you can't tie it to anything with the house necessarily. I don't know if it's connected to the family. Our family, I don't know. There's been another male apparition seen that is not fully formed, so they recognize that as an apparition. And the two ladies are more transparent, so people, when they see them, they realize it is an apparition.
Mhm. Okay. Now you've written several books. Let's just talk about Haunted Carthage, Missouri.
Okay.
What's significant about that book?
um Carthage is pretty unique. It's had so much history. It had Indian War literally in the downtown area in the 1830s, a lot of Civil War activity, including the town being burned twice, um, a lot of mining related tragedies, etc. And really the most of the downtown area has activity.
Really?
Yeah.
So when you go to investigate these sites, do you go alone or do you go with a team?
I have a team, a Paranormal Science Lab, and so usually several of us will go together. I don't usually advocate, investigating alone, especially in locations you're not familiar with. Um,
Right.
One, just practical safety reasons, and two, you may encounter something that's a little more aggressive or ill-willed towards you than expected. I just think it's always a good idea to have someone around.
Mhm. Percentage-wise, how many of these hauntings, let's say, are just people that have lived there and, are just coming back or just want to stay, versus something negative that wants to harm the people that are in the house?
My experience is that the vast majority of hauntings are not malevolent or very negative. I think a large, I'd say a good fair percentage, probably half, are either family members of the people who live there, whether they live there,
Mhm.
those other family members had lived there or not, or probably even more than half had a connection to the property, whether they lived there, had a significant event there or something. Um,
Mhm.
my experience is that most of the times that you have an owner that thinks something is very negative or even inhuman, it tends to be a human spirit that just isn't in a good mood, or not, not the most polite person. I tend to say that if you're a jerk in life, you tend to be a jerk in the afterlife.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, if they encounter that, they misinterpret that as being inhuman or demonic, etc. When in reality, you've just got a jerk.
I I agree with you on that one.
Yeah,
I've found that many people automatically jump to the far end of the spectrum.
yeah. I
Something,
think we can
and
we can thank the Exorcist movies for that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a little over the top.
Yeah,
Uh, what's the strangest place you've ever investigated in Carthage?
in Carthage. Hmm. I mean,
Or
there's several.
in Joplin?
Well, first, let me give one in Carthage.
Okay.
Is an old bar and barber shop from the 1800s that is all underground and only accessible by a trapdoor.
Oh, wow.
And
That's strange.
well, a lot of the downtown area had originally had businesses that were all basement level and access separate from street level. And so you do have these places that now are basically closed off, and this is one of those. But it's really neat because it's almost a time capsule, because pretty much everything is exactly the way it was in the 1890s, down to
Wow.
graffiti on the wall and wallpaper and everything else.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah,
The
it's pretty
so
cool.
what was going on there?
Um, the building above it is a business, and they would have various activity, hearing voices, etc., hearing by sound like people walking through the building, doors opening and closing that couldn't be explained by airflow, that kind of thing. And so they were real curious, about what the cause was. Of course, it was an old building to begin with, um, but very curious if that had anything to do with it. And one curiosity is that we did find lots of animal bones buried under the floorboards.
Oh, now that's strange.
Yeah,
I,
it was
I
almost like it would be almost like remnants from a butcher shop or something. But as far as anyone could tell, there's never been one there.
oh, that's very strange.
Yeah.
Good thing there weren't human bones,
Yeah, no human
but
bones, but
but
cattle and pig bones and everything, and they basically were under the floorboards in the basement. Um, Full body apparition there as well. Um, just an interesting place, because you don't typically get something all closed off like that.
when you investigated, did you get any evidence on tape?
Yes, we did not a lot of um, photographic or video evidence. There were some odd light anomalies that kind of hard to pin down one way or another, but certainly interesting. But we did get EVPs that indicated that there was a man there by the name of Rodney, and he said several times that he wanted to speak, but he never told us a lot of information.
Oh, okay. He just wanted to be heard, huh?
Apparently, I think he just wanted to be acknowledged. So, and the owners of the building still say that things happen that they think are Rodney, so he's still there, they think. So,
Okay. So you also have a book called Haunted Joplin.
yes.
Obviously, we know what the theme is. What are some of the strangest places there that you've investigated?
Oh, I've investigated, Peace Church Cemetery. I've investigated some of the sites related to the 2011 Joplin tornado. One interesting place was a former ice house. It was an ice house during the 1800s and early 1900s during the mining days, and it served as a temporary morgue when there were fatalities in the mines. They would bring the bodies to the ice house to keep them cold until the bodies could be claimed. That was an interesting.
Oh, wow.
That was an interesting one and had quite a bit of activity, and did seem to be centered on that time period. People connected to mines and to the early days of the town.
Were you able to get any EVPs from there?
We did. We did get some, and that were related to that they knew they had passed and they'd been hurt, injured, and things like that.
Before you go out on an investigation, do you do anything to help protect yourself and your team?
We are big believers in grounding yourself. I tend to meditate. Other team members do as well. And if we have members that are various belief systems, but we all basically go through a grounding and spiritual sort of process to make sure that we are grounded in a good frame of mind. It's not unusual for us to cleanse afterwards, depending on events during the investigation as well.
Yeah, that's important. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
You've been on a number of television shows, including Death Walker, Strange World, Ghost Hunters, Monsters and Mysteries in America, Twisted Believers, My Ghost Story Caught on Camera, which I want to hear about, The Haunted Collector. And so I've just got a question about how is it working with these shows? Do they give a good representation of what you're trying to express, or do they cut out most of it before it airs?
I found that I've had different experiences, varying experiences on that point. I think one thing that a lot of people don't think about is that all of the shows tend to have a certain perspective, and people don't often think about. I mean, you're in the same boat that showrunners tend to call people like you and I looking for locations, and it's often we are looking for something that fits this bill. This is what we're looking for this season. And I think some are better than others about portraying what really happened, and some are more bent on making it fit, the motif that they're looking for, Yeah.
I've had some experience with that, so I totally understand. And you can never go into it thinking it's going to be perfect when it's done.
No,
but it's fun.
It is fun,
and it gets the information out there.
It's information out there, and I always look at it. Hopefully, it helps give exposure to locations, and especially locations that do public events and invite teams in. And you just kind of have to roll with it.
Tell us about this. My Ghost Story Caught on Camera, episode 3, season 6, Little Ghosts on the Prairie. What was that about?
That was at a Civil War era home in the Carthage, Missouri area, Kendrick House. And it was built in the late 1840s, and only one of 3 houses in the area that survived the Civil War, because so much of South Missouri was burnt during that time, and both sides used a scorched earth policy. and it was lived in by the same family until the 1980s, and then turned into a museum. And I've worked with them for a lot of years, and then I'm on the board of directors now as well. Interesting that there are still people involved that are part of the family. So it's, basically a direct line from the 1840s to now.
Oh my.
Yeah, and it's very active. There you get evidence consistently over time of about 12 different voices repeatedly, plus others occasionally, and several different presences that are connected to the family, and some that aren't. It was also a field hospital during the Civil War. It was a sick house, a community sick house before there were hospitals. Midwives would come birth babies there, so they literally have no idea how many people lived and died there. And so it's quite active. But two of the spirits that are pretty active there are two little girls that were in the family. And so that's the reference and the title of the episode.
I see. And
Mhm.
did you experience anything during the filming of the TV show?
There were some experiences during the filming, being touched, some EVPs, etc. But and they also used evidence that we already had as well. And it's probably one of my one or two top favorite locations, period.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm interested in the Ghost Hunters, episode 5, A Fright at the Opera. What's that about?
It actually, it was also in Carthage, Missouri, at the old opera house on the square. And it's one that actually they got chased down the staircase by Shadow Man there. It is very, very active. The building was built on site of two buildings that were destroyed during the Civil War. And then there was a prominent murder in the building, as well as other things. So you get apparitions, including an apparition of a couple that are in Victorian evening wear, like they're going to the opera, that people encounter and think they're real until they get up close and they disappear. They've actually had people run out of the building yelling they're not real before.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a man that's seen standing in one of the opera house windows, and it looks like he's dressed in a gray suit. Actually, he's been caught on camera, where you can actually see through him. You can, because he's standing in front of the curtains, and you can see the fold of the curtains through him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There's a little girl that in some ways I think she's probably my favorite. That for a long time, this little girl is seen in several different buildings in the downtown area. The common factor is that all of the buildings had entrances to the underground tunnels and caves under Carthage at one time. And most people assume that there's a legend that in the 1920s, some kids got down into the caves and didn't make it out. They couldn't find them. So it was assumed that she was one of those kids. But we found in research that while the Opera House was being built in 1878, they had dug the pit for the basement, but they hadn't pumped the water out from the tunnels yet. And there was a carriage accident, and a woman and her young daughter were thrown into the pit and washed away, and they never found them. And so I really think that that's who it is. You get a lot of EVPs for her asking for mama, where's mama, that kind of thing. She's been seen in other buildings, and to the point of people thinking a kid's locked in the building and calling the police. We actually had the local police department intercede, asking one of the building owners if they would let us in, because they were so tired of being called out on false alert calls.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so
Uh,
I've actually seen her image on security footage that officers have shared with me
oh
uh,
wow.
in a different building. Um, I've I had one experience with her that the most vivid was, we were up in the opera house and we're getting ready for an investigation. We were walking down the back staircase to the main floor, and there were four of us. And as we're walking down, we hear behind us a young girl yell, "Wait!" And
Oh.
to the point that you think, that's not disembodied. That's someone yelling. We go
Mm-hmm.
back up, search the entire, floor. There's no one there. Um,
Oh
and
my.
yeah, so there's quite a bit of things there. There's a shadow man there that seems very protective, and that's what seems to have chased a couple of the ghost hunter casts down the staircase. And actually, if you watch the episode, they do show that where they run.
Oh, we'll have to find that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. What do you think is the reason for all of these active hauntings in Carthage?
I think. Well, I think it's kind of twofold. One, you had a lot of things happen with the Civil War and so forth. So you had a lot of death, a lot of tragedy, just a lot of energy and emotion involved.
Mhm.
And then, to be honest, I think part of it has to do with the geology, because um, the whole area is a limestone plateau
Mm,
and undercut with a lot of underground rivers, lakes, and caves, with a very high crystal content in the limestone. And
yeah.
I kind of think it just acts like an amplifier. If whatever's there, it gets amplified.
Yes, indeed. That's true around and especially around limestone buildings too,
Mm.
with all of the courts. Uh,
And
I've found
and
that to
there's
be
a lot
true.
of that in this area too, because quarries in the Carthage area, it's referred to as Carthage marble. It's limestone, but when it's dressed out, it looks exactly like marble, and it's called Carthage marble. In fact, the capital in Jefferson City is made of Carthage marble.
Yes, my ancestors built two houses, one in Rich Hill and one in Kansas City, out of the Carthage marble,
Hmm.
and they're still standing and they're in perfect condition. They look like
Yeah,
they're brand new. You can't
exactly.
hurt that stuff.
No, no, it's
So
it's
hard.
it's there for to last. And so I really think it's a combination of the things that happened in the area, plus the geology and all of the underground water and moving water.
Well, I think it's interesting that you have an interest in history as well as paranormal, because if you're looking at a site that is haunted, say, you
Hmm.
do want to know what the history was, because that could definitely have some factor involved in why it's being haunted. It,
It often does. And even if it's haunted by someone that, say, isn't, someone that owned it or lived there or whatever, um the history can often give you context of why someone was there, that had some sort of connection that made them want to come back or stay.
Mhm, mhm. Let's go to Joplin now. Your haunted Joplin book.
Uh-huh.
Uh, just pick a site to talk about.
um Probably, well, one real quickly and then another. Probably the best EVP ever caught was in the library uh, on Main Street, which is now the old library, because they have a new one. But it was built on the site of a very luxurious hotel, the Connor Hotel, that was demolished in 1978. And ironically, there were a couple of men killed during the construction of the hotel with accidents, and they were getting ready to demolish the hotel and 3 men, it was the night before it was to come down, and 3 men were still in they were in the basement still prepping things, and it came down early. And 2 of them passed. So then afterwards they built a library on it, and always had a lot of activity. We investigated a number of times, but 2 of the really interesting things that happened there. One was we were doing an EVP session, and one of the investigators asked if Mr. Connor was there, who owned the hotel, as well as the hotel that was there before that one. And we didn't get Mr. Connor, but we got a male voice with a very heavy Irish brogue that says very clearly, he and I have been known to, and he just starts chuckling and mumbling. Sounds like he's had 1 or 2 pints and feeling really good. And it very much came across of like, oh yeah, I know Tom.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Another thing there is that, as with a lot of hotels, people would check in to check out. And back in the day, they didn't always put it in the paper. But there was an account late in the hotel's history of a concierge retiring who had worked there for over 50 years. And he recounted that he knew of 10 suicides for sure. And he was the unlucky fellow that when they had someone that didn't check out, of course, it was built in 1906, had transoms over the doors and everything. He was small enough that he got sent through the transom windows to unlock the door and find out what was going on. So he tended to find the bodies.
Oh no.
And he discussed the one that affected him the most was a well-dressed lady who checked into a room on the 8th floor, had ordered a milkshake, and then drank her milkshake and then jumped out the window. So one night we're investigating. We have team members and library staff, as well as a couple of local historians with us. And I asked the question, is the lady who ordered the milkshake on the 8th floor with us? That's all I said. And you get a disembodied wail and sobbing that just filled the whole area, the whole main area of the library, to the point everybody turned around to where it was coming from.
Oh my.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. Another location was the Olivia Apartments. It was very luxurious apartments that built in 1906 that, Italian marble. Every apartment was unique, had a different floor plan, had a different fireplace, et cetera, and unfortunately, about a year and a half after it was built, there was a very tragic explosion. Young desk clerk, 20-year-old fellow named Marvin Reynolds, he was the night clerk, and at 5 o'clock in the morning he would do nightly rounds in the basement, just checking on things. There were businesses down there, and then they had storage for tenants and so forth, plus the boiler and furnace and all that. And they had a cat down there to keep mice down. And so he would go down and feed the cat. And at the time, all of the lighting and everything in the building was natural gas, which was not uncommon. But this was before they put odor in natural gas. So Marvin goes down, he hits a light switch, nothing happens, and he strikes a match, and it ignites the gas. There'd been a leak. The boiler explodes. A fireball is sent through the hallways and actually up through one of the first floor apartments, severely injuring the couple who lived there. And poor Marvin was blown through a brick wall. One of the other first floor tenants was a doctor, and the explosion happened. He ran to the lobby and realized he wasn't there and figured he was downstairs. So he later testified that when he got to the bottom of the stairs, where Marvin was about 12 feet from the bottom of the stairs, up against a pillar. But it was so smoky and hot and everything. It took him 10 minutes to find him. And when he found him, he was still alive, but burned so badly that his skin is peeling off and his knuckles are falling out. But saying, and the doctor carried him upstairs, and there was nothing he could really do for him, but he lasted about 30 minutes. And he said repeatedly, please don't tell my folks, and tell Mr. Bendolari it wasn't my fault. And that was the owner of the building. And then repeatedly cursed that damn cat. And Marvin definitely seems to still be there. He's been seen in the building as well as in houses around the building, usually at 5 a.m. And one witness in a nearby house, who I know, actually I knew her way before this, and she related it to me. She woke up one morning and it was about right at 5, and she just felt, like someone was in her room, and she rolls over, and that she said there was a man standing there with most of his clothes burned off of him, and his skin is peeling and off and just bloodied, with his hands over his face, in a defensive posture like that. And he was there for, 15, 20 seconds and then disappeared, which would make perfect sense. And then another thing that would happen would be that you would find bare footprints in different places in the building. And the building, by the time we were investigating and doing tours and so forth, it was empty. It was being worked on in stages. But so you'd have dusty floors, and you'd walk into a room and there would be bare footprints, and they measured out to about a size 10 man's shoe. But there would be not a speck of dust in those footprints, almost as if they were wet,
Wow.
all the dust. But it would start, say, in the middle of a large room and then walk towards a wall, and as if they would walk through the wall. And it'd be in places that there's no way someone could get there without disturbing other dust and everything to be a hoax. And that was always very interesting.
It's interesting how a spirit can materialize enough to leave a footprint behind, or say move something.
Yeah.
Or you feel their touch.
Mm-hmm.
And here, they're in spirit world. That's just, it amazes me. I see it all the time or hear about it all the time. And it's just incredible that can happen.
It really is. And in this situation, it's very obvious that it's not someone trying to trick people or anything, because there's no way there would be no way in most of the cases that they could have created those steps without leaving other evidence, short of someone getting a crane in there and setting someone in the middle of a very large room.
Yeah, which would be impossible.
Exactly.
Why do you think that the spirits come back to places or haunt a place?
I think a lot of times it's because there is some sort of connection, whether, I think like in that case for Marvin, obviously his death, but, just so much emotion expended there. And sometimes it's because it was a place they really, loved, maybe they lived in. Or sometimes I think it's just a place that made them feel good, kind of like, haunted fancy hotels that, someone checked in to check out, or some place that they just enjoy going, that I kind of look at it. I would rather be at a very beautiful place or tranquil place than hanging around a tombstone, And I think it
Yeah.
kind of just depends on that person, what would make sense for them, where they'd be.
I think that's a good explanation. The spirits that return to sites that, places that they've lived in before,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't want to leave because they are so attached to that house.
Mm-hmm.
I found that with older people, especially, that they've lived in a house for a long, long time. Do you suggest to them that they should move on, or do you have any conversation like that with them?
Well, I kind of look at it that if it is an intelligent haunting, if it's interactive, I think to me it's kind of rude and presumptuous for us to say, "Oh, you need to leave." And various people have different ideas of, "Oh, they're supposed to do this or that." Well, we don't really know. I mean, we literally, until it happens to us ourselves, we have no idea what the rules on the other side are. And there's a lot of situations where it seems that you have entities that cross over the veil and then come back and forth. So I don't presume that I know what they're supposed to do, but I find that often there's a compromise. If they're really attached and want to be in a place, that often there can be a compromise of, okay, the new owners, the people who are here now, they don't want to be disturbed at night, or not in their bedroom, that kind of thing. And often you can reach a compromise if it seems to be interactive and intelligent. And I think a lot of them don't even realize that they're bothering someone. They're kind of doing their own thing, and kind of oblivious that it affects whoever else is there, is kind of my finding.
Do you ever have to explain to a spirit that they've passed on, one that might not understand that they are dead?
I don't think that's my place. I think that's human ego being presumptuous. That I think that most do know anyway, and make a choice. I think it's very rare for one to not know. They may just not talk about it much, but again, I kind of view it that we don't really know. We presume we understand the physics and the dynamics on the other side, but I mean, it's kind of like the cautionary movies where the kids always know the real answers and the adults are the idiots trying to make the rules and making it worse. We could be doing that. And so I take the viewpoint that it's not my place to try to make someone do something, or, oh, by the way, you are dead. Also, it also presupposes that it's a lingering spirit. And I think there's a lot of times that activity is more a function of time and space bumping up against each other, so that we're getting a glimpse of a point in time in the past, and they may be getting a glimpse of us too. So in that situation, saying dead, leave, doesn't make any sense. It'd be the same for them telling us you're dead, leave. So, so I tend to, I tend to not go there, simply for the fact that we may have unintended consequences from not really understanding the situation.
You mentioned time and space. I had a case a few years ago where a girl died, and her two friends would see her every year on the anniversary of her death. And that was the only time that they would see her. She would appear in the car with them. She'd appear in one of their houses. She would appear, if they were out at a bar somewhere, she would appear at the bar. Have you ever run into any case like that?
I've had one where it wasn't necessarily the only time that there was appearance by this entity, but that her death date did seem to always have a sort of a stronger presence or a stronger activity.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that may just be, again, maybe kind of revisiting that moment. We really don't know how the other side experiences time, so it could be that, that moment has significance, so they revisit it. Or if you look at it from quantum physics, every point in time coexists, past, present, and future. So if
Right.
that's the case, theoretically, they could visit any point in time whenever they want.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's
Yeah.
why I try not to presume what telling them information that they aren't aware of. And frankly, they may be aware of a lot more information than they're telling us. It's kind of how
Right.
yeah.
Right. Now, you're the a producer and a writer of the Dark Ozarks TV series. What is that all about?
Well, yeah, I'm co-executive producer with Josh Heston, and Josh. And basically, Dark Ozarks is a TV show in development that highlights dark history, mysteries, legends, and the paranormal in the Ozarks region.
That sounds absolutely fascinating, and I can't wait for it to be out. I'm sure you can't mention the network just yet,
I
but
can't, no.
we look forward to that. So as soon as you do know, if you'll let me know, I'll put the word out on my end too.
I certainly will.
And you've got you still have several books. Let me just show these 4 books: Haunted Carthage, Missouri, Wicked Route 66. What is that about?
Oh yeah, Missouri's Wicked Route 66. It's Gangsters and Outlaws on the Mother Road, and it's all sort of the darker side of Route 66. We're so used to Route 66 being, all Americana and kitsch, motels, diners, etc. But there was a lot more that went on, and it's been full of outlaws and contraband, etc. since day one. And a few ghost stories are thrown in there too.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. And then, of course, we've got Civil War Ghosts of Southwest Missouri and Haunted Joplin.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any more books in the works, by the way?
Actually, I do. I'm working on one that is based on some real events, and then we are in the process of writing a series of Dark Ozarks books, and hopefully the first one will be out later this year.
Well, that sounds absolutely fascinating. How can people get in touch with you and the Paranormal Science Lab and get your books?
Books are available pretty much on any book site, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc., or in the region, a lot of the local bookstores. To get in touch with us, you can go to the website paranormalsciencelab.com and get in touch with us. We're also active on Facebook under Paranormal Science Lab, and you can contact Dark Ozarks the same way on Facebook, Instagram, or the website. So,
okay. Then I've got a couple of graphics here. Tell us what these are.
Just logo for Dark Ozarks, and just highlighting that we look at the noir side of history and the legends. So if you and again, that's just sort of another logo highlighting that we bring stories to light that often are left in the darkness, and making the connections that you don't always see between different things.
Well, those are really great logos. I like them.
Thank you.
Well, as a final note, what advice would you give to someone who is just getting started in paranormal?
I would say talk to other people who around you that investigate, and if you can go along with them, or if there's public events, and don't stop with just one team. Find a a fit because, not everyone approaches everything the same way, and go in with your head first, and not expecting thrills and adrenaline. Lots of, research, grounding, know what you're getting into.
Really good advice. Thank you so much for being on the program with me this evening, Lisa. And of course, we do not want to miss your talk about the Hornet Spook Light and that area next weekend at the XCon.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that. Excited. And thank you for inviting me for that.
Sure thing. And I can't wait to hear it. This is Margie Kay with Onix News, and we'll see you here again next week.
You've been listening to the Onix News Podcast with Margie Kay. Any rebroadcast or duplication of this program or its content without express written permission from Onix Media or Margie Kay herself is strictly prohibited. The Onix News Podcast, in direct cooperation with the internet website onxmedia.com.